we're going to pick it up in verse 10. There we go. When Pharaoh drew near, the people of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they feared greatly. Let me just stop and reset up what's happening. We are to the point where Israel has escaped. We're out of Egypt, and now we've come up to this, what the text calls the Reed Sea, which our English translation calls the Red Sea. And they've stopped because it's like, well, you hit water, you can't just keep walking. And then Pharaoh has had a change of heart, and he and his army are chasing after them. So the Israelites notice that that's happening, and they feared greatly. And the people of Israel cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Is it because there are no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done in bringing us out of Egypt? Is not this what we said to you in Egypt? Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." And Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent." The Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry ground. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so that they shall go in after them, and I will get glory over Pharaoh and all his host, his chariots, and his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten glory over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of the Lord, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night, without one coming near the other all night. There's a lot there, right? And some of it, unless you weren't paying attention, some of it is a bit concerning. If you weren't paying attention right now, you're going, what? What did I miss that was concerning? Don't worry, that's what I'm going to talk about. It would be nice if I could get a little feedback, okay? So let me just do it this way. Will you just respond when I say something that kind of resonates with you by going, or amen, or yes, right? Can we do that? Yeah. Just for this morning only, and then we can go back to being a Reformed church. The text says that the people cried out to the Lord. And I think all of us in the experience of life can identify with moments that brought about such concern in our hearts that we cried out to God. Not the people bowed reverently and prayed. The people prayed the Psalms. The people read their favorite theological book. They just cried out to God. We know what that's like, right? And if you don't, you will someday. Recall Exodus chapter 2. Exodus 2, the people are enslaved and nothing's really being done about it yet from a human perspective. In verse 23, it says, "During the many days that passed, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God." Now, the word in Exodus 2:23 for cried out is the same as the word in Exodus 14, 10, 11, 12. All right? You with me? Okay. In Exodus 14:10, it says they feared greatly. In Exodus 2:23, what was the problem? In Exodus 2, what was the problem? They were in slavery. They groaned because of the burden of their slavery. You go forward 12 chapters, and now they're fearful, but they're still crying out. Okay? It's a visceral, reactive cry. Listen, this is no organized prayer. The word that we get in Exodus 2:23 and 14:10 describes a complaint born out of gut instinct. 21 years ago, maybe, I don't know, 20 or 21 years ago. I'm bad at like years. Where do you start? Anyway, Lisa and I lived in the townhomes in what we used to call the ghetto of Papillion, which was down in the end of Cordes Drive. There were these not nice townhomes, but they were cheap. I think it was like $650 for a 2-bedroom, and it had a basement. So Lisa and I lived in one, and then Matt and Hillary lived in the one next door, and then Tim and Nikki were down the road a stretch, all of us living in these townhomes. I'm downstairs on a Sunday afternoon, probably playing video games, and Lisa is upstairs doing something, I'm not sure what. You've heard this story before, probably. I was a genius at the time, and I had figured out that when you finish burning a 3-wick candle in a jar, the wick might be gone, but the scented wax remains in the bottom. So I had taken probably a kitchen utensil before we were married and carved the wax out of the jar into a saucepan, and I would simmer it on the stove to achieve the same smell as burning the candle without the soot. I was doing candle warmers before Target ever heard of them. Lisa decided this Sunday afternoon to reclaim the saucepan. So she was also a genius. The quickest way to reclaim the saucepan would be to heat the wax up at a rapid pace and dump it out, right? So she puts the stove on high and walks away for a few minutes to wait for the wax to melt so she can dump it out. When she comes back, there's a 5-foot flame shooting out of the top of the saucepan because there's oil in the wax and it ignited, it caught fire. Her solution was to pick the pan full of a 5-foot tornado of fire up and carry it over to the sink and run some water in it. That caused the waxy, oily tornado fire to explode up onto the kitchen curtains, into the dining room, on the dining room chair, and her to scream bloody murder because it also splashed onto the hand that she had used to set it in the sink. I'm down in the basement. All I know is I hear my wife scream bloody murder. I get up, I make it to the bottom of the stairs, and I look up the stairs, and by now Lisa has come around the corner and is looking down the stairs at me like terrified. It's just one run of stairs, there's no landing. And for some reason, I cried out, "It's okay." Not like that. I cried it out with everything I had. "It's okay!" All the blood vessels in my eyes burst. What a strange thing to say. I had no idea if it was okay, right? But I think I so wanted it to be, or I was so afraid that something life-ending had occurred to her that once I saw her standing up, I knew at least we're that okay. We're that, right? It's the same thing that's going on in Exodus chapter 14. They cried out. It was not thought out, organized, heart-driven. It was just a guttural cry. I have to finish the story, not because it's germane, but because if anybody hasn't heard it, you're sitting there wondering what happens next. I sprinted up the stairs, and by the time I got up the stairs, the cloud of smoke in the house was already at about eye level and dropping rapidly. And I come around the corner to the dining room, and I see one of the dining room chairs is on fire, and I see the curtains are on fire in the kitchen. And we didn't have a fire extinguisher, which is why Lisa, anytime a newlywed couple gets married, that's our gift to them. She gives them a fire extinguisher. So I don't know how I did it. I grabbed the dining room chair, shoved open the sliding glass door, and just chucked this flaming chair out the door. And then I ripped open the dishwasher, grabbed the flaming curtains. I don't know how I didn't burn myself, and threw them in the dishwasher and slammed it shut and turned it on. And that saved the apartment, and probably Matt and Hillary's and everybody else's. That why would I have renter's insurance, right? So we were rescued, and Lisa and I both learned a valuable lesson that day. She learned probably to involve me in undoing my science experiments, and I learned that just because you shout it's okay doesn't mean that it is. Sometimes we shout what we hope is true, though, right? And sometimes we cry out to God simply because it's the human instinct. It seems that the Israelites had seen enough of God's power to assume that he was capable of intervening here. We're at the end of 10 plagues. So it seems the Israelites had seen enough of God's power to assume that he was capable of intervening as they stand between the Red Sea and Pharaoh's army. Their fear, trapped between the Egyptians in their chariots at a distance and the Red Sea at their backs and these unswimmable waters, drove the cry out of them. That's what happens. But this seems to be a cry of fear, not of obedient faith. This seems to be a cry of fear, not obedient faith. This is the equivalent of a lost person screaming, "Oh my God!" right before the car collides into something or someone. To prove that this is not a faith-filled cry for help. Look at what they do to Moses. Moses receives the blame for the circumstances. They accuse him. And this isn't the first time we've seen this duality in the Israelite people, is it? In Exodus 4, let's read it. 30. Exodus 4:30 says, Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshiped. So, Israel gets word that God's going to get them out of slavery, and what do? They agree. That's a good word. We liked that. And they bow their heads and they worship. One chapter later in Exodus 5:20, the people met Moses and Aaron who were waiting for them as they came out from Pharaoh, and they said to them, "The Lord look on you and judge, because you have made us stink in the sight of Pharaoh and his servants and have put a sword in their hand to kill us." This is before the first plague. They've already waffled. They went from, "Oh, praise Jesus," to, "This pastor is a real problem." Now, though they have 10 plagues of experience to draw on here in Exodus 14, they do the same thing. It's the same thing. And I mean, nobody was complaining about Moses' leadership when they were all trotting out of Egypt laden with Egyptian treasure, right? Nobody was like, "This guy's an idiot. I could do better than this." They were awestruck. They were like, "This is wonderful. This is great." This is the place where many pastors would take you on a journey through their personal frustration with the congregation constantly second-guessing them and not appreciating them. You would listen to a half an hour of me vaguely suggesting that I'm a hero for even having the strength to get up in the pulpit and preach with all the grief I get for it. Poor Moses, just trying to help people, and everyone just blames him when everything seemed to be going wrong. Nobody appreciates Moses, and they're probably mean to his wife too. Well, think about it. She's right there with him. And she's already kind of not thrilled with the situation. We saw that in Exodus 4 when she takes a flint and does some business, right? There's actually a far more powerful and profound observation to be made here if we put aside how hard the pastor's job is for a moment, which I think we should always put that aside because it's not the job of the good shepherd to whine to the sheep about how hard his job is. Why do the people cry out to God but accuse God's human agent? Why do they cry out to God but accuse Moses? What's going on in the heart that does that? I suspect this has to do with the fact that they've been made aware of God's power, but they're not sure he's good. They sort of believe God can save them, yet in the very next breath, they turn on Moses with bitterness and blame, questioning his leadership, and by extension, they're questioning the whole deliverance project. Everything that's happened up to this point is now under question. They won't accuse God of malice. We would never do that, right? They won't accuse God of malice, probably out of fear. I'd rather gnats not consume me or die of dehydration because the water all turned to blood. But Moses, I'm not gonna malign God, but Moses is fair game. It's a classic case of shooting the messenger. And my point is that this has almost nothing to do with Moses. This has almost nothing to do with Moses. This is not the put upon pastor's life verse. This is a litmus test for our faith. If you love and trust God, it won't be easy for you to be someone who treats people with harsh disregard. The prince and the pauper alike are sinners who need grace, right? Everybody on earth is a sinner who needs grace. You'll treat people as such if you have a heart filled with faith. You will seek to produce kindness and truth in all of your interactions with people. The gospel implication here is that if you really believe that God is powerful and should be feared, you won't be quick to attack people when you don't like your circumstances. Now we have to think about what that looks like. Because if you sometimes at the end of an event have to say, I'm sorry I said that, I don't know what got into me. I just told you what got into you. It's the same thing that gets into me. I would never, ever face heaven with my hands folded and say, God, you're doing a bad job in my life. I would never do that. Why? Because I think he's sovereign. I think he's the Alpha and the Omega. And I think he could, turn me into a pile of ash at any moment. So I would never be so breathtakingly brazen as to say, God, you're messing everything up. But I'll do it to my wife, who he says to love as Christ loved the church. I'll do it to a coworker. You'll do it to your parents. I don't like my circumstances. I find somebody to blame. I take it out on them. And many times, it's totally reasonable. Like, they caused it. They had a role in it, whatever's going on. But the heart that's at work there is not reasonable. It's a natural impulse, I think. When God's ways feel hard or unclear or uncertain, we will lash out at people we can see rather than wrestle with the one who we can't. A Christian wrestles with God. Remember Moses' complaint in Exodus 5. Okay, so the people get done going, you made us stink in the sight of the Egyptians, right? Right after the Pharaoh makes their task harder. Moses turned to the Lord, Exodus 5:22. Moses turned to the Lord and said, Lord, why have you done evil to this people? You remember that? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has done evil to this people, and you have not delivered your people at all. You imagine praying and talking to God like that? Moses takes his frustration straight to God, and God does not strike him dead for insolence. Moses takes his frustration straight to God, and God does not strike him dead for insolence. The very next verse indicates God chose to take almost no offense at what Moses said. You know why? The same reason my kids can slam the door and say, I hate you, and it doesn't affect me. I'm like, no, you don't. And don't slam my door. All the doors in this house are mine. Whack. Just kidding. Just joking. Exodus 6:1, God responds to Moses' complaint. Now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand he will send them out, and with a strong hand he will drive them out of his land. God does, throughout Scripture, generously and mercifully bear with those who bring their complaints to him. I'm going to say it again because everybody quits listening 3 words into the sentence if you started listening at the beginning. God does generously and mercifully bear with those who bring their complaints to him. You know where it becomes a problem? When you'll complain to everybody else, but you would never talk to God that way. In Job 10, listen to the most righteous man on earth. And just remember, right, whatever Job says, I would be 1,000 times worse if I went through what he's going through, I think. Job 10:1, I loathe my life. I will give free utterance to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know why you contend against me. Does it seem good to you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands and favor the designs of the wicked? Woo! Right? And the 3 homies that were with them were probably like backing away slowly. Because you don't talk to God like that. Job 13:3, I would speak to the Almighty, and I desire to argue my case with God. In Job 42:7, the Lord speaks. After he had spoken to Job, the Lord said to Eliphaz the Temanite, my anger burns against you and against your 2 friends, for you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. What? God, we need to go back and look at Job 10 and Job 13. I think you forgot something. All right, and to be fair, it's not like God didn't take issue with anything that Job said, but there are other passages where he gently scolds Job. But he didn't take anything Job said personally. At no point does God say, how dare you malign my character? God says, will the fault finder contend with the Almighty? And that's all he's got to say. And Job is like, behold, I stand silent. I got nothing else to say. Let's take notice of, on the whole, how God overlooks Job's irrational speech when Job was in the midst of great sorrow. I'll give you another example of what I'm talking about. In Psalm 22, David says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Now, think about that. David's words imply that God has not kept his promise to never leave or forsake you. God said, do not fear, I'll never leave you or forsake you. A couple hundred years later, David's praying, why have you forsaken me? Why didn't you keep your promise? Isn't that what he said? Rather than earn a rebuke, David's words are enshrined in Scripture and, in fact, are spoken by Christ at Calvary's cross. None of those reactions are the perfect example, though, right? Job and David were perfect men. They were not perfect men. Matthew 26. Everybody turn there. This is worth seeing. Matthew 26, 36. Then Jesus went with the disciples to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And taking with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." Not remain here and take a nap. Did you see it? Remain here and watch with me. And going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, for the second time, he went away and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words again. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, "Sleep and take your rest later. See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." So, just of note, how does Jesus treat his disciples who are sleeping, couldn't stay awake and pray with him in his darkest hour? How does he treat them? Not like I would have if I found somebody sleeping while I was preaching in my heart. Some of you are like, "I've slept before." I know, and I murdered you in my heart and then had to spend all afternoon repenting. How does Jesus appeal to God when he doesn't like the circumstances? He says, "I don't like the circumstances." That's not sinful. It's not sinful to go, "God, I don't like this. I don't want this. I can't handle this. I don't buy Romans 8:28 right now. It's not working for me." But he finishes by saying, "Not my will, your will be done." Back in Exodus 14, God's response to the cry of the people is fascinating. And I think it confirms what I've suggested to you. In Exodus 14:15, the Lord said to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward." And I think it's worth noting, you haven't studied the text, I'm guessing, but I have. No mention is made here that Moses prays at any point. When I first read it, I was like, whoa, God's telling Moses not to pray? And then I read it a second time, I'm like, well, Moses didn't pray. And then I read it a third time, and I'm like, oh, that's the same word, cry, in 15 as up there in 10. God's responding to the people. They cry out. Then they annihilate Moses. And then God says, why do you cry to me? To them. Tell the people of Israel to go forward. The reply from heaven could be summarized, why are you standing there yelling at me in terror? Move! And prayer is, by the way, nowhere broadly discouraged in Scripture. There are a couple of specific occasions when God tells certain people to stop praying or not to pray. But they're very specific. Like, it would be weird if I couldn't make sense of this. And you had an instance where God said, stop praying and start doing stuff. Because that's antithetical to the gospel. He's saying, stop sinning and get moving. Jeremiah 7:16, the Lord says to Jeremiah, as for you, do not pray for this people or lift up a cry or prayer for them, and do not intercede with me, for I will not hear you. Ugh. Jeremiah 11:14, therefore do not pray for this people or lift up a cry or prayer on their behalf, for I will not listen when they call on me in their time of trouble. Ooh. Jeremiah 14:11, the Lord said to me, do not pray for the welfare of this people. Every single one of those examples has a background. The people have a background of serious religious hypocrisy, claiming to be prophets when they're not, speaking on behalf of God when God did not tell them to say that. Seems to be something that God really doesn't like. By comparison, God does not command Moses to stop praying. Moses doesn't even seem to be praying. And the people, when they cry out to God, God responds to the attitude of their heart. And where do we see the attitude of their heart? In the way they treat Moses. And again, you'll note, I'm not up here going, this is why you need to be nicer to your pastors. That's not, it's anybody. When your life circumstances are painful and you're lashing out at people around you, brother, sister, you've missed the plot. Take that complaint to God. Well, I don't want to be irreverent. What do you think treating people like trash is? What does he say? Well, you show me reverence, but you denigrate your brother or your sister? Out of the same mouth come blessing and cursing. These things ought not be. You want to check the quality of your faith? How do you treat the people around you? Lost, saved, church members? It doesn't matter. How do you treat them? By and large. We got to search our own hearts. Do we attack the people that we can see rather than wrestling with God whom we can't? And what does God say we should do? All right, now I'm going to read us into the text a little bit. All right, pretend you're Israel, one of the people, backed up against the Red Sea. You were going this way. There's the Red Sea. You heard something, and so you turned and looked. Chariots. All right, now, what direction are you facing? Are you facing freedom? Liberty? Or are you facing slavery? So they're turned. They're looking at Egypt, and what do they start saying? Moses, didn't we tell you to just leave us in Egypt where we're now looking? It would have been better for us to die there. What does God say they should do? Tell the people to go forward. Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Now, this ought to resonate with the heart of a doubting believer, okay? And let me explain why that is. And if it doesn't, don't feel bad. If you were like, I don't know, it was just words and I was reading them and I'm like, what does this have to do with me? That's okay. That's why I'm up here trying to explain these things. If it doesn't resonate with your heart, listen. We are sometimes, maybe oftentimes, frozen, just stuck in fear and frustration, waiting for God to do something, right? You get some word, you get some bad news, you get some trouble in your life, you get some circumstances where you're like, it just kind of brings everything to a halt. And whatever you thought was coming next, that isn't what's coming next. And you're like, well, now I don't know what to do. And you're just kind of stuck. We want to know what the outcome's going to be before we make another move, right? I don't want to be foolish. I don't want to just start reacting. It seems that when it comes to following God, action sometimes precedes clarity. Consider Abraham. In Hebrews 11, verse 8, the writer of Hebrews says, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. Remember that? No, you don't. In Genesis 12:1, This is how it goes. The Lord said to Abraham, go from your country, your kindred, and your father's house to the land that I will show you. So depart these three things that you're familiar with and go to the land that I'll show you. He doesn't say head east, head west, head north, head south. He says get out of your daddy's house and go to the land where I'll show you. I will show you. I haven't told you yet. I haven't shown you yet. I will bless those who bless you. Him who dishonors you I will curse. And in all the families, in you rather, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abraham was told to go, so Abraham went, not knowing where he's going. The Israelites are boxed in, right? Red Sea on this side, Egyptian army on the other. God tells them to move forward, and it's hilarious because they kind of can't. Either direction. And that's us. Something happens. You feel like, I got to move, and you can't. Maybe you're gripped with anxiety. Maybe you're crushed with depression. Maybe you have some addiction, some predilection you don't know how to shed. You can't get out of it. You can't move. You're stuck. Anything you do, it looks like it's going to blow your life up. Any move you make, it looks like it's going to lead to disaster. They kind of couldn't. I think some clarity comes in the specifics of God's command. What does he say to do? God says, move forward, not back to Egypt, not back to slavery, not back to captivity. Forward. Okay? What does that mean? That means they got to go this way, towards the Red Sea. They can't unless they've got some scuba gear, right? But what do you think probably happens? Because here's my guess. My guess is Moses goes, listen, folks, God said move forward. I think they probably turned. And the moment that they turned and started facing the correct direction, look at Exodus 14:19. And the angel of the Lord, who was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud and the darkness, and it lit up the night without anyone coming near the other all night. I think sometimes to get an answer to your cries for help, you just need to be facing the right direction. Right? And I think you can kind of break it down like this. You can be facing people and accusing them and suggesting that they're out to get you and they're destroying your life, or you can be facing God and pouring your heart out to him. But you got to move one way or the other. The hearts of the people were already wandering back to Egypt. How can you, you got a sack, I'm assuming, unless they had nice luggage, you got a sack of treasure on your back, on your donkey, on your goat, whatever. Treasure that the Egyptians were like, here, take all this gold and silver and diamonds and jewels and get out. It's still on your back. It's still on your back, and you look at Moses with a straight face and go, is it because there weren't enough graves in Egypt? That's us. That's what we do. We get saved. We're all like, oh, it's wonderful. My life's never going to be the same. I'll never smoke, drink, or cuss again, right? 6 months later, I should have just stayed. Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians, for it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. They're not facing the right direction. They're looking back. And you can tell because they attacked Moses for bringing them this far. So here's what I would say, right? There is no going back for the Christian. We don't get to go back. It's forward only. It's the only move available to us is forward. Now, the problem is, everywhere I go, I'm still there. And that's unfortunate, right? If we could have less of me wherever I'm going, it'd probably be a better place to be. Don't find a scapegoat when you don't like the circumstances. Like, I moved forward and everything went to trash, and I think it's Denise's fault. Don't do that. Take your complaints to God. Move forward in faith. And I think you get pointed in the direction of obedience. This has been my experience. I can't say it absolutely. You get pointed in the direction of obedience, and God starts to move. And sometimes he gets behind you to protect you. Sometimes he gets out in front of you to lead you. Sometimes he's both places at the same time. Amen. Let's pray.